Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes of public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness initiative. This episode is also sponsored by the POCUA, a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement, as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. Always remember, if you aren't banking with the POCUA credit union, you're just working with an institution that just so happens to serve public safety professionals, and you deserve better. Hi, I'm Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I'm excited today because, yes, we have another great guest, and I never say we have a terrible guest, but this guy
I'll be that one.
Yeah, you'll be that one, you know, like we talked about before, press and record, the one that, you just don't air. But by twisted, and I say that in a very fun way, guest today is a gentleman by the name of Darren Burch. He's had a 30-year law enforcement career. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but he's also a fellow author and a fellow podcaster, and we need that today. We want to hear some great stories, hear about podcasting, and of course, hear about what he's done in law enforcement that's going to benefit our audience. But Darren, welcome to the show, man.
Honor's all mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, my pleasure. Always fun to have, number one, a law enforcement professional. Number two, a fellow author, because only you understand the pain of another author. and a fellow podcaster, because we certainly can have some fun here.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're right on all counts. The hardest thing about the book was the crayon to print conversion process.
Yeah, you find that you need a few more pages on that, but at least with crayon, you don't lose a whole chapter in the cloud like I did, but we'll talk about that maybe later.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Ouch.
exactly. Talk about twisted but true. But before we even get into that book, you had a 30-year law enforcement career, mostly with the Phoenix Police Department, if I remember that correctly. Check your facts, Ken. It's right here in the bio. Phoenix Police Department, 29 years. But you retired and you wrote a book. You started a podcast. I believe you're also on a radio show, if I remember that right. Are you busier now in retirement than when you were working as a police officer?
I really am. And I was busy. I worked sex crimes and homicide. I was always getting called out, worked 3-4 days straight, depending on the case. So I was working my butt off, and not trying to pad my last three for retirement purposes. I was forced there, based, and again, child crimes and rapes. And so, the worst of the worst. And so I was very busy. Now I'm busier, but I'm smiling more. Yeah. It's just a great gig, reinventing yourself in retirement. You're still doing a lot of things to help the community. Like I'm involved in like 5 or 6 different nonprofits where I'm in the board of directors, for different purposes, so we don't, clash.
Sure.
Writing the book. Like you said, I had a radio show, old school AM/FM type show, in the Valley. Is a big, station in the Valley here in Phoenix. And then with the podcast. But the best gig of all is now I'm grandpa, and I'm Popo to him. So I love that. Best gig there is.
Well, see, now you actually could enjoy being called Popo instead of somebody yelling, "Hey, it's the Popo."
Exactly right. I love the tongue-in-cheek stuff, which is a lot goes in the book with that. Cops, we all have dark, demented sense of humors. Yeah. That gallow humor to keep things light when you really are in cop mode and have to, keep calm when the mayhem is all around you. So, but having that in mind, I may be busier, but it's as rewarding, because again, I still feel like I'm helping. Like the book I wrote, the first one, 100% of proceeds went to a Crime Stoppers program here in Valley called Silent Witness. So I was able to assist on that end. So it's just been a really fun ride.
Yeah. that is awesome. And if I came across it correctly, I believe your show 50 Info is tied to that silent witness, is it not?
100%. The show is in the Valley. So at first it started off as a tip, solicitation mechanism,
Mhm.
but the demographic was senior citizens. We weren't getting a lot of tips. So it became more of a,
Well, you got tips, just like somebody stole my garbage can, and nobody will move these fronds that
the
are
kids are
sitting
on the
here for a
lawn. Get the
week.
kids off the lawn.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
all my friends in Chicago won't understand the frond thing for not having palm trees. But go ahead.
yeah, exactly. I kind of tweaked it when I was the Crime Stopper sergeant, which was the end cap of my career. Like you said, 30 years. The last 6, the 7 was as a Crime Stoppers sergeant, which was pretty much the director of the Silent Witness program, and it was more or less turned into a information mechanism to kind of educate about different scams, especially with the elderly. When you talk about, with the phone scams, the internet scams, and all that, you know how they are. If there's a tragedy, the scam artists come out of the woodwork, whether it's the weather, kids, what have you, they come out. So it was more of an educational thing. I enjoyed it, loved it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I ended up signing a contract with a TV production company, and I had to forego. So the current Silent Witness sergeant, current Crime Stopper sergeant, took over perfectly, and he's helming that show. And now I just have the podcast, which is fun.
Yeah. Now he gets to listen to all the elderly scams. And
Yeah, exactly.
it amazes me how stupid some of these scammers are that call.
Even the smartest of us, but I have good news. Just yesterday, I lost my social security number. I got the phone call. Apparently I'm under investigation. So my social security number was suspended. I've never known that to happen. So, yeah.
Cool. Does that mean I don't have to pay taxes anymore?
I'm hoping.
That actually can work out. Yeah.
I'll work with you. Keep the investigation going.
Yeah. It always makes me laugh, and you probably have even seen this. There's a YouTube video out there, I think, scammers from Africa or someplace called I think it was a police chief or
saw that. Hilarious.
Yeah,
she did such a great job.
It was so someplace in a small town, and it said, well, what's the arrest number? I can look it up right now. Anyhow,
work with me. Stay on the phone. Work with me.
Anyhow, this is the twisted comedy portion of our show where we went completely off the rails. But let's stay with Twisted, because I want to hear more about Twisted But True. Those folks that are listening to the audio version of this episode, go to YouTube and find the video version, because Darren has a cool backdrop with his book cover.
I believe in being subtle. I believe in being subtle.
Yeah, it's like, there's, not only is there the backdrop, there's the book on one side, it's like, you know nothing about branding. I can tell that right now. So it was published in October of 2017. If I understood it right, you even kind of coincided that with the Halloween holiday. Which, being the true crime director for Podcast Magazine, I think is very cool, by the way. And I just love the way that you introed it. But how long did it take you to write it? And what was the motivation? Was this something you were riding around in 2002 catching bad guys, and you said, I need to write a book? Or did you retire and say, I need something to do, I'm going to write a book?
Yeah, it's funny. When you join Academy, you always have some senior officer tell you, hey, Rook, write these things down, you're going to forget them, blah, blah, blah. And I was like any other cop. I didn't write anything down. And at the end cap of my career, I'm now the Crime Stopper sergeant. So I'm doing radio, TV, and so forth. And I had this great gig on a local rock and roll morning show. I mean, it was great, good tip, sources, a lot of headbangers, that had some intel and so forth. But the best part of the show, after I did my crime of the week, soliciting tips and so forth, was stupid suspect stories. Now, this time was 2008. I didn't trust the internet, or maybe I didn't know the internet, probably better said. So I didn't know how to vet some of these stupid suspect stories. You know? So I didn't want to pass along bullshit, you know?
Yeah, we're
So
just going to roll with it, and we'll
yeah,
figure
hope
this
it's
out as
true.
we
Maybe
go.
it's not. It sounds funny. So I was telling stories that I had encountered, because we all have, you know, you can't go a career, whether in a small city or a big one like Phoenix, which is like 6th largest or so. You're going to see stuff, and it's crazy stuff. It's insane stuff that you can't, you know, it's not stuff you see on TV. And so I would tell these stories. I call them twisted but true tales. And they became so popular that and we do it Tuesday mornings. And one evening on a Monday night, I'm taking my daughter shopping or something for school or something. I'm listening to that rock and roll station. It's what I listen to anyways. And there's a commercial, a tease for tomorrow's morning show. And it says, join us for Silent Witness Sergeant Darren Burch and his Twisted True Tales and Gene Simmons with Kiss. I actually beat Gene Simmons on the tease. It was like, wow. So it's huge following. And the reason I say that is that one day I was coming out of the studio, and this guy walks up and says, "Oh my God, you're, you know, that guy on the radio show, you know, Sergeant Burch. And I love your Twisted Tales. You need to write a book." And it got me thinking. And again, I joke about the crayon, you know, process to print. I'm not a writer, you know, I'm an author. I'm no writer. And so I thought it had some merits, because I had these. Every time we get together, you know how cops do, we get together, we talk stories, war stories. I just found mine were, you know, their story plus you add a dead body in the mix. You know, that was mine. You know, I had this black cloud. I was a kind of shit magnet. We know, you know, they're not because I was a great cop, just shit fell on me. And,
what is today going to bring?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I thought, as a Silent Witness Sergeant, I had a lot of investigative allies, having worked everything from burglary to homicide. If there's a tombstone for your career, mine would be sex crimes. I worked sex crimes for about 10 years. So I had a lot of friends in the investigative field, in all facets and all cities across the state. So when I came to become the Silent Witness Sergeant, I was able to tap into those, and we, the team and I, were able to increase the arrest by 50%. Well, the problem with that is it's a Crime Stoppers program. You're paying for these tips. So it's an unusual business model. The more successful you are, the more you're paying out. And we paid out 50% more in tips. And after 6 years, kind of broke the bank.
Yeah.
And so I felt guilty. I mean, in a weird way. And so when this guy said this about the book, I thought, perfect fundraising mechanism. I can actually maybe give back. And so it beyond my wildest dreams, when the book came out, 3 years, it took, you know, finally answering your question. It took 3 years.
That's okay. We got
long
time.
story
Go
short. So after 3 years of writing it, I put it out, and it just blew up on social media with Amazon, and it becoming a best-selling book for like a month, top 1%. It was humbling how well it did and how many people loved it. And that was based on social media, you know, completely the benefit of that. And understanding that animal, having been the Crime Stoppers sergeant, using social media to help solicit tips and so forth. And so we've been up to date almost $10,000, which isn't a lot of money, obviously, but books don't make a lot of money, you know.
Correct. As a fellow author, I can concur.
You get that.
my mom bought a copy, you know, my wife bought a copy, and then a couple other people that I don't know. But yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, making $10,000 is pretty significant.
Yeah. I was so happy and again, truly humbled. I mean, people always say that, you know, but I was truly humbled how many people loved the book and how well it did. You know, over 100 5-star reviews on Amazon to date, won a couple of awards. Just real lucky that it did real well. And these were out of when I was doing that rock and roll morning show, I would do it each week, did it for several years. So I have like 200 stories, and I would write them down, because with radio, as you know, is, it's all about time, not so much with the podcast, but old school AM, FM radio, you have a time window, and that's it. You got to be succinct and fast. So I broke it down in a kind of outline, statement, joke, statement, joke, statement, joke. So when it was time to write the book, it really kind of wrote itself, in sense of, it was just an old cop telling a story. And that's really what the book is. It's perfect for the bathroom. You can read a couple of chapters while you're going number 2. I don't recommend doing it number 1. It could be a messy, because some of them you will laugh out loud.
Yeah, you could always try it, but you want
to stand, a little newsstand.
You want to read the whole chapter, man. So I don't know anybody that has to take a piss for that long. But either that, or
I will say this: they're short stories. You may be able to do it with a piss break. You might be able to do it. Most of them are very short, fast, fun. There's a couple compelling. It starts off on a tragic note, why I became a cop. It was an unusually twisted story, why I became a cop. And then it ends on a very tragic, personally devastating loss. So it ends on a sad note, which is really why I wrote the second one. 3 years later, the book's been out 3 years, and so many friends were saying, we need to know more about that last chapter. So I had 200 of these stories, and I was saving. I shouldn't say I was saving. I was avoiding the worst of the worst. I was, the first book is almost family friendly. It's almost family friendly. And the second book, not so much. It's definitely the, if you're over 18, it's a good book for you, that kind of advisement. There's a warning in the front that the publisher put on because, again, there's a lot of mayhem in these stories, and each chapter is a story. Each chapter ends with a twist. Sometimes the twist is truly like a Paul Harvey, for those that are old as I am, now the rest of the story, a true twist. And the other is sometimes just what were you thinking, Darren, advisement, don't do this at home, kids, that sort of thing. Because there's as many stupid suspect stories as there is dumb Darren dilemmas. I mean, the first book is just one dumb thing I did after another. And so I like that.
It's almost like 2 books.
Yeah, it really is. It was a tale of 2 Darrens, one dumb and one smart. The second book, which is now out, just came out literally a week now, so you won't see a lot of reviews or anything like that. But I think it's a better book because, as you know, when you write the first one, you learn a lot. I don't know how long I spent on the first book. I spent days, if not months, on just the first paragraph. And then when you're all done with the book, you go back and say, well, that has nothing to do with, tying things together. So I learned a lot of things with the second book. It was a lot faster writing. And I think it's good. In fact, it's already been picked up by ID Channel. You remember the guy, Joe Kenda, the homicide hunter with Colorado Springs. Having worked homicide, you're lucky if you get a 40% clearance rate. This guy had like a 99% clearance rate. This guy was kick butt good. And so he hosts a show. It's called American Detectives. And so far it's slated to be the season finale, is one of the chapters from the second book called That One Case. Because every detective, you always have that one case, whether it got away from you or whether you're just so glad you solved it or something in between. We all have that one case, and this was my one case. So So again, long story short, it took 3 years.
Now a word from our sponsor, the Police Officers Credit Union Association. The POCUA can suggest a credit union that serves public safety professionals in practically every state in the country. One state we definitely have covered is Delaware. The Delaware State Police Federal Credit Union was founded in 1960. The idea was to create a financial institution whose purpose was and is to protect and help Delaware's most precious resource, their troopers, lead financially successful lives. In the years since, they have grown and developed into an organization that honors all of those that serve and protect. They are the credit union of choice for all employees of federal, state, county, and municipal agencies or departments engaged in the law enforcement community on the Delmarva Peninsula. For more information about Delaware State Police Federal Credit Union, go to dspfcu.com or call 888-288-1080. To find an institution to serve you in any of the other 49 states, go to policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't banking with a POCUA credit union, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve public safety professionals, and you deserve better. I understand the gallows humor. I really do. Whether it's a police officer, firefighter, other public safety professional, it's almost like a defense mechanism.
It is. It's
helps
not even
your
almost.
mental health.
It's spot on. It is a
Yeah.
defense mechanism, no doubt about it.
And I could see that, especially with sex crimes. I think of one of the first podcasts I had the pleasure to cover for Podcast Magazine was Small Town Dicks. Yardley Smith, who also does the voice of Lisa Simpson on The Simpsons, who's actually, by the way, a really, really nice lady, has two police officers who are brothers on that show, and one of them his expertise is sex crimes. And so basically what he has to do, and you might identify with this, what he has to do is basically act like a 15-year-old girl on Facebook, even though, he's a, grown man with kids and everything else, and talk about, okay, what do you want to do with me and all that. And he makes fun of this, and I understand it, especially because a lot of these suspects are just really, really stupid.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't get that. It's like, well, can we just look at your Facebook page and then you'll be okay? Well, no, I don't want to do that. But I think that, kind of like I heard with that podcast, that humor helps you to deal with that, because this is, my words, some real sick stuff, and you had to deal with that. Does that help you, and does that kind of explain that gallows humor a little bit?
It's, first of all, spot on in terms of needing that safety net mechanism. It helps you decompress. It helps you live in the moment when you go, I call cop mode, when you have to, put on the big boy pants and you go in cop mode and have to deal with something horrible. I never worked internet crimes against children, which is what your story is relaying to. But it's interesting because I dealt with them hands-on, where, they're dealing with the computer, they can have that anonymity, but I would still do the same thing in a sense. I would interview some pedophile and talk about, no, I get it, sir. I get it. She was 13. She had the prettiest legs in the world. Yeah. So tell me why, and then we go into it. You kind of, minimize the morality aspect, never the crime aspect, never the elements of the crime. But what was interesting about them, go on a tangent here a little bit about sex crime, because it was my passion as well. It's, again, that's where, if you had a tombstone for your career, mine would be sex crimes detective. It really would be, above homicide and everything else. They have such there's no word to describe it in the English language. It's this drive to offend, to trespass sexually, whether it be power, controlling, what have you. They're driven. It's a sexual paraphilic drive that's like nothing we can relate to. Yeah. And I've had a predator who sexually assaulted his son, and I said, I can't. And this guy was talking to me. He was a Honeywell professional, an engineer, intelligent man, hell of a lot smarter than I'll ever be. Mm-hmm. And I said, I can't wrap my head around why you would do that as you relate, because he turned himself in. He knew how horrible it was. He turned himself in. I said, why would you do that? He said, it consumes my every waking second. Yeah. And so to your point about how can they be so stupid on the internet, it's that drive that makes them stupid. They're so wanting it that they kind of throw caution to the wind, and we can catch them with a big old net many times based on the internet crimes against children. Now, I've assisted those when it becomes a victim. We find the victim, then I go and interview the victim with my expertise and so forth. And so, yeah, it's that gallows humor is absolutely a must when you're working those type of cases. You got to deflect that pain that you're feeling. And to that end, when I wrote the book, and again, the book is 90% funny. I mean, or maybe 83.5. But it's funny, you know, it's mostly funny.
Now you're going back to your radio days on 83.5 FM. Yeah.
And yet at the end of when I wrote the book, I went through a sad moment. You know, I don't want to call it PTSD because it wasn't.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in my career that I had outlets. I was able to talk and so forth. And again, I hate even calling it PTSD. It's PTSI. It's an injury based on what happened on duty post. But I had a post incident in that sense where I'm writing these funny stories, but then all of a sudden all these other stories are coming. I no longer have my cop hat on. You know, I'm not in cop mode. I'm in retirement mode. I'm in writing a funny story mode, and bam, some of these stories kind of hit you. In the book, the one that I really hit home on in the first book is I've been shot at 3 times on the apartment. Only one was I able to return fire. The other 2, I was in a situation where there was either friendlies or I didn't have a clean backdrop. Yeah. And on the one where I did have a shootout at OK Corral, I really took painstaking effort to put the reader in my but that one chapter in the middle called the shootout, you know, brilliantly enough, what a brilliant title.
Yeah, I was gonna clever. Yeah.
Very cryptic. Yeah. So so I wrote that with the idea of keeping the reader who's never been in a shootout, hopefully living it step by step, minute by minute, second by second, with a twist at the end. Because so many times, and every cop can attest this, someone will say, how come those cops shot that many times? And it's like, well, you have 8 cops at different perspectives. No one knows whether or not everyone else can shoot. Like in my other 2 scenarios being shot at, I couldn't shoot. I would have potentially hurt someone else, put someone else in harm's way. I had, just take cover based on the situation and rely on another officer to be able to take the shot. So, it ends with a twist. Every chapter ends with a twist. And this one ends with you don't see it coming twist in the shootout. And which is a lot of shootouts. You have no idea what's going on to your left and right. You have this tunnel vision effect to save your life. You go in this filter mode, things slow down, but out here, you don't see diddly. Yeah. So again, unless you're a SWAT stud and you've been in shooting after shooting, then it's just another day at the office. Granted, me, not so much.
Yeah, it always amazes me in the unfortunate anti-law enforcement sectors that we do have, and in our country at times, there are some incidents where I'm kind of like, cop could have thought a little bit differently there, but there are many that I see, and you've got protests. People want to write their feelings on a cardboard box and then staple a stick to it and drive it someplace and talk about how upset they are. But you see even on video is, all right, this police officer has about 1.5 seconds at best to react, ascertain, and figure out the best course of action. When was the last time you only had 1.5 seconds to make a very serious critical decision on something?
And then on top of that, they have that Hollywood impression of what law and order is, and not to get political or anything, but the president-elect made a comment about cops shouldn't shoot to kill, and it's like there's not a police department in this nation that teaches shoot to kill, and not one is shoot to stop. And just those mistake, and granted, probably didn't mean anything by it. I'll give them that benefit. But again, not to get political, I'm going to segue really quick. It's easy to get political in these environments.
Yeah.
But when you hear people talking about a shooting with a guy with a knife, they don't understand that a knife is a repetitive weapon. It doesn't run out of blades. I'd rather be in a gunfight than a knife fight any day of the week. I can stop that cylinder from rotating on a old revolver. They're not going to get a shot off if I can get that cylinder in time. A knife is just a losing proposition. So when you hear about these shootings where some guy with a knife was attacking, it's one thing if he's just standing there and you got 20 feet, plus distance in, 20 yards, that's one thing. And, you have the ability to assess and back and back and back and so forth until someone else is in danger, and then you're forced. But no cop wakes up and says, I want to get in a shooting today. It just, you don't. You don't.
Yeah, boy, I really hope that I could shoot somebody, and
I haven't tested out the gun. I don't know if it works.
And I could be second guessed for
exactly.
For
my family can be in trouble. I could be sued.
And
what a fun day at the park.
Yeah, that would be awesome if I could start my day like that. So I hear you. There's unfortunately a lot of ignorance out there. Just shoot them in the leg.
It is.
Well, all right.
It
anyhow,
is.
don't even.
Sometimes they're misguided. Sometimes they're disingenuous and they have an agenda. It's again, we see peaks and valleys. We will get over this. We will see the calm after this storm. It will happen. There's more good people than bad people out there. There's more people that truly get it. And now you're hearing more and more strong endorsement of police than probably before because of the loud noise.
Yeah. I truly believe if we could get past the emotion, and we had a guest on here, one of the earlier shows, that talked about the fact that you can't fight emotion with logic.
Yeah.
And if we could just get past the emotion for just a second and say, all right, even say I'm pissed off for whatever reason, and I realize that I accept it, and now I want to talk about what we can do to change things. I think that somewhere in all of this crud, we have an awesome opportunity to really make some serious changes. I think that community policing makes a lot of sense. I think that as you would know better than I would, some of the best stories that I heard were police officers working within the community where nobody got arrested and nobody got shot, nobody was even taken into custody or back to the precinct. Things were handled because my windows keep getting broken in my van over here, behind my grocery store. I don't know what's going on, and the police officer that understands the community says, no, I understand exactly what's happened. Let me take care of it. And go ahead.
When it comes to community-based policing, it is the cornerstone of police work. It's a catchphrase. It's probably overused, but it's no difference than the old school walking a beat, knowing your beat, knowing the bad as well as the good, knowing who to go to find out some intelligence, keeping them safe, keeping them anonymous, i.e. Crime Stoppers, and taking that intel. And then in the 21st century, we take it to another level with all the cameras, and now we have facial recognition. You saw how quickly we caught the Boston Marathon bombers based on that technology. It's easier to solve a crime with a million set of eyes looking at a photo than it is one cop hitting the beat with his, So we're doing really good police work. Having worked again from the 80s into 2014 when I retired, I saw a lot of vast improvement. And when people talk about reform, police work is all about reform day in, day out, because we revolve around the community we serve, because it is the community we serve. We're part of that community. So community-based policing is all those aspects, not just some funny, nice little program that, somebody throws up, and likes the sound of the acronym. It's just that old-fashioned police work, knowing your beat, being part of the community. And that's what police work is, day in, day out. And it will go back to that once the dust settles with this. The problem with this is that when you have this noise, you have 100 days of protests. And I use protests with air quotes in Portland. The police aren't doing police work. They're babysitting a protest line. And as much as I absolutely, having been in the military, defend anyone's right to free speech and to have a say. And if there's ever a time that someone wanted to say something of importance, was during George Floyd. That was horrific. And I've lived during the Rodney King riots and that aspect. So I get, all good cops understand the right to protest, and we're defending your right to do that. So why are you spitting on me? I have nothing to do with George Floyd. I have nothing to do with these other things that you believe, and rightfully so with the George Floyd case, were horrific. And people take advantage. There's people political that is disingenuous. They're just using it. They're weaponizing a horrible incident. They're exploiting it for their own gain. And it's a shame, but it will end. I really believe that. We've seen these peaks and valleys. We saw it in the 70s. I had friends that were in the 70s that were always getting shot at by the Black Panther movement and so forth. So, we've seen this in law enforcement, and we will survive this. We really will. And to your point, is that dialogue. And keeping that dialogue open. There's that saying, there's no arguing with a drunk. And right now, when people are angry, they're kind of like that drunk mentality where they're not listening, they're yelling. And as soon as they start listening, and we can have that dialogue, and as long as we're willing to listen ourselves to understand where they're coming from, because, I don't live in the inner city. I know in 30 years of experience with the Phoenix Police Department, I saw zero, literally, racial incidences, not one. I've seen heavy-handedness. George Floyd was an example of that. That was street justice played out, I believe. Right. But I think once calmer heads prevail, to your point, and we have a discussion, I think good things can happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Darren. And to it being somewhat the king of the segue going into your podcast, you mentioned all the cameras and things that we have available now to solve crimes and help the policing. I think too that part of the, whether you want to call it healing or just simply making a connection and engagement, is using the new media, which is podcasts. People realize that first responders are just human beings. They're just they're just folks that want to go home to their families like everybody else. And I think it does play a role in humanizing the badge a little bit, as some of us say. And your podcast is even called Badge Boys. It debuted in January of 2019. Talk about the podcast. Is it tied to the book in any way? I'm assuming that you still bring that dark and twisted humor to that podcast like you did to the book.
And trust me, I will definitely go down that road here in a second. To your first opening, talking about if there's ever a time we need to hear from police officers, retired, because as police officers, we can't talk. You're subject to discipline, and you can't go down that road. So you don't have a voice. But as a retiree, you do. And I agree with you. We need more police podcasts. On my podcast, I'll have people on and I'll say, you need to start your own podcast. We need more voices, not less. This is not a competition thing. This is not a, holding our toys so no one else plays sort of thing. This is where we need more officers, not less, talking. And when you talk about a podcast, anyone can have it, from the high-end studio like you have and I have with Badge Boys. I'm very fortunate. But just an old school street cop to seasoned homicide veteran talking about their perspective, and not just preaching to the choir, which is beautiful. I mean, we definitely have a demographic that likes the show, but talking and educating about real police work, and like you said, humanizing the badge, humanizing what we do and why we do, and how our passion. Every career cop, not the cops that come and go, maybe with a year or two on. I can't speak to that. But every single career cop has a passion and love for this job. And it's self-evident when they talk. You can hear it in their voice. You hear it in their passion. And when they retire, it's not a light switch. It doesn't go off. So to that end, I was very fortunate. I did radios, like I talked about, did radio shows and TV and so forth as the Crime Stopper Sergeant from 2009 to 2014. And when I left, I wrote the book, and we had this legend in the Valley by the name of Dave Pratt. And as I say his name, I smile, because he's one of those DJs that he was just a legend. He was funny. He was hilarious. He was back in the 80s and 90s when you could be yourself and there was no political correctness. He was the most politically incorrect human being on the planet. And just a great guy, huge following. And so I went to him about the book. I was wondering if he would endorse it. He did. He's a great guy. He endorsed my book, loved the book. which helped a lot. That also helped promote the book. Again, I'm very subtle with my promotions.
Yeah, I
And
noticed. Yeah.
so, hey, if I can get somebody like Dave Pratt, who's known not just in the Valley in Arizona, but known, he was with Howard Stern back in the day. So, he's name recognition. And so after endorsing my book, a year went by, and there was a gentleman by the name of Jason Schechterly, and I call him the heart of our show. 100%, he is the heart of our show. He was horrifically burned in a police vehicle collision where a taxi cab driver having a seizure going 100 miles plus rammed into the back of him. The vehicle blew up. There was litigation involving the Ford Crown Vics at the time because of it. The gas tanks had that propensity to explode.
Right.
And he was horrifically burnt from his head down to his navel, horribly disfigured. Could not be a more beautiful human being on the planet. And so Dave thought, I take this guy who does radio. We both have a face for radio. We don't have a face for TV. So we put them together and see what happens. And it's been a beautiful marriage. We bring different aspects. His career was sadly shortened because of this horrific, tragic event. Mine had 30 years. He ended up going to homicide and assisting homicide investigations at the end of his. Mine is really geared towards sex crimes. Even on the political spectrum, I'm more of a moderate. He's more of a conservative. I'm moderate conservative, probably. Any moderate would hear me and say, that's not moderate. But so, we have been doing the show for 2 years now. We've had people on that have survived the North Tower on 9/11, seeing the second plane impact, or feeling it, I should say, more than seeing it, seeing the effect on their sister twin tower, and trying to come down 34 flights, giving us literally a second by minute, step-by-step harrowing encounter. Just one great guest after another, lots of cops, sometimes criminals, have them come on. We've even had a defense attorney. We had Jody Harris's defense attorney, and I love the guy. I've learned more from defense attorneys than I have prosecutors, because they will tell you what they're looking to mess you up on the stand. So we've had a lot of great guests. It's called Badge Boys. Again, it's at a high-end studio. It's called StarWorldwideNetworks.com. If you went to StarWorldwideNetworks.com, you can see all the different shows on this network. But if you want to just Google, and I guess that's a term because I'm an old man who doesn't understand the internet. But if you want to Google, use any search engine at your command, you can go Badge Boys and find our shows. And we have over 100, close to 100 shows, I guess, by now, which is probably nothing to you, but that's a big deal to us. We're at that, triple, we're no longer, 2-digit midget. We have triple number. We got 100. But it's a great show. It is about building bridges with the community. There's times where me and Jason will disagree politely, respectfully. We understand we're both coming from a place of the heart that we believe it. So what is there to argue about? When you look at back in the past, and you look at like someone like Reagan and Tippy O'Neill, where you had the opposition party and the president loving each other. You know what I mean? Why can't we do that again? Because we all love this country. Those who don't, then hell with you. But those who love the country and want to do better, then we can. Compromise is not a 4-letter word.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, my friend. And I did find your podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, excellent.
That's definitely an easy way to find it. Love what you're saying on compromise. I hope that we can actually get there. Hopefully before I retire, which I don't.
Yeah, in 2021 we'll look at it as 2020 hindsight.
Yeah,
Be hindsight. Would that be nice?
Exactly. Well, I could talk to you for another half an hour, but before we wrap this up, I really want to know, what is the craziest law enforcement story you could share, whether it's from your career or one of your partners or what you heard on your show? What's the craziest story?
You know, again, sadly, it's my own stories because I'm hoping one day I'll meet someone that has a more twisted, demented, morbid story than mine. I really do. Then I can go to them for counseling. Uh, you know, the one in the first book that people sometimes can't even read. It gets that bad. As a sex crime detective, there's not a lot of male victims, and not that there isn't male victims. It does happen, especially when in the pedophile world where you have a female teacher and male students, and that's a crime. But there was one case that I get a call to hospital, and the suspect and victim are both there, both having some type of surgery done. They're both in extreme pain, the suspect and the victim. And so as a detective, I now go to the scene and try to figure out this mess. And so the story will go chronologically, but to kind of shoot to the punchline, as it were, what happened is and we'll call him Sam, because I always say that I want to protect the anonymity of the victims, and I want to embarrass the suspects. So I give them also pseudonyms, you know, like Little Dick or something.
Yeah.
And so with poor Sam, he was a good Samaritan, so I called him Sam. Sam gets a phone call, and his neighbor is saying, I need your help. I'm in dire trouble. And Sam's saying, hey, I'll call 911. And the guy's like, no. And they barely know each other. It's one of these things where you know the neighbor by you do a head nod when you take out the garbage. You know, that's all they know. So he was shocked he even had his phone number. And so the guy's screaming on the phone, like, I need your help desperately. Please come to the house. And unfortunately for Sam, he doesn't think better of it, and he decides to be a good Samaritan, and he goes over. He doesn't call 911. He walks in. The house is unlocked. He walks in. He goes into the garage, and there is his neighbor bent over the workbench, naked, with his pants down to his ankles, with a beer bottle sticking out of his butt. It's a long neck Bud bottle, by the way. And it's stuck.
So it wasn't like a red stripe that was short.
No, okay. Exactly. Where it's just, you know, like maybe if you fart, you might get it out. No, not at all. This is in for the duration. Yeah. And because he's been tugging on this thing, he's created this vacuum. Now, granted, that's science, but, you know, instead of thinking it through, you know, poor Sam ends up getting talked into pulling this beer bottle out of his butt, and he can't do it because it's a suction. And the more he screams, the louder it gets. And the whole thing about the time window was the guy with the, we'll call him Bud, with the beer bottle in his ass. Bud is screaming bloody murder, and poor Sam is pulling. They don't hear the family car coming up the driveway. And Bud has a family. In fact, on leave is his big Marine son. And the big Marine son comes in and sees somebody sexually assaulting dad with a beer bottle and beats the living shit out of him. So these are the type of stories, and that's just one example. I can't say that's the most twisted, but it's just one of the examples of the stories that's in the book. And again, that's the first book. The second book's even more twisted.
Yeah, you know, go out and just buy the damn book.
Twisted but True, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, they all have it. You can go to twistedbuttrue.com. But yeah, and again, the proceeds on our first book all go to the Crime Stoppers program. I wrote the second book, and I was going to start to figure out what, you know, nonprofit, so portion of it goes. But in order to save my marriage, half the proceeds come to me. So I can't say that anymore.
Got it.
Yeah, or to the wife.
Well, you know what? I can keep talking to you, but I know you got other things to do. But Darren, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I had so much fun with you.
Honor and the pleasure was all mine, my friend.
No, pleasure's all mine, because it always is on this show, because we always have great guests like Darren. Make sure you check out Badge Boys. You can easily find that podcast on Apple Podcasts. Take a look at Twisted But True. You know, it's Christmas is coming up, so
thank you.
Buy like 18 copies.
Everybody wants a beer in a butt story. They do.
Exactly.
Absolutely. It's a perfect Father's Day gift as well.
Exactly. You know, give it to your father-in-law, you know, especially if you don't like him that much. You know, you may not be as fortunate as I am to actually like your in-laws. But Darren, thank you again. And thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we will be with you next week with another great episode. Take care. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.